I want to take a minute and just bounce off some things that Brian said in terms of having conversations. They're all leaving. Standards, that's boring. I'm going to join them. You can't take anything too seriously. But like I mentioned yesterday, when we started this thing, we didn't know very much about it, and we thought, listen, if we could just bring people together and talk about it, we would create those kinds of conversations, we would get stuff like that done. And so one of the first places that I had an opportunity to visit was with Brian Nielsen on his podcast. And that sort of started a relationship. Eventually, as GBA grew, he helped us from a technology perspective. He just did so many things, introduced us to legends in the industry. And so he's always been somebody that's been facilitating those conversations. As we started building it and we started moving into different areas, and I'm going to get to the BMM in just a second, we started realizing there was a lot of controversy. And one of those areas where there was a lot of controversy was in voting in elections. And there were people who were diametrically opposed to the concept of blockchain voting because it would require connection to the internet, and they believed anything connected to the internet would have no integrity and would be corrupted. And these were good people, right? But diametrically opposed to what we wanted to do, and I think we were good people too. So we invited them to a Zoom call. We do a lot of sort of online webinars, and it got passionate. In fact, if Amelia is here, she's not here, if you go to our YouTube channel and look at the voting digital debate or the ballot digital debate, there's a couple of them. On one of them, she was in a conversation with the folks that are on the other side. And when you hear conversations like this in a public Zoom meeting, there was very well attended. I don't know, there may be 100 plus people on it. She said, "And if you do that, I will sick the FBI on you." So it was passionate. So after that discussion, I invited the opponents to a private meeting. And we met every week for about a year and a half, right, to go through all of the things that we disagree on. Because these folks were going to legislators all over the country and convincing them to go to only paper and to remove any kind of electronic voting. And really, they were destroying the ability for us to do the kind of things that Eugene was talking about. After a year and a half, we've got to the point where we've produced a document. We're now going to send it back to them for their organizations to review, where we've come on the same page about what the risks and the ways to overcome risks are for electronic voting. And that paper, as soon as we can get signatures on it, we will send to every local election official in the country. So those are the kinds of things that we've been focusing on. And so I'm going to circle back around to that in a second. When we looked at the problem of how, there are a lot of companies coming to us to say, we want to sell our blockchain solutions to governments and enterprises. And we started peeling the onion back, and they couldn't do it, right? So we launched a project to try to solve that problem. This topic is on blockchain and cryptocurrency standards. Let me just say one thing about cryptocurrency. We're doing the blockchain standards first. We're going to walk through that. We have a second project that is called the Cryptocurrency Maturity Profile. And we're just going to talk about that briefly. The first phase was we built tools to help public policymakers understand the size, trajectory, and velocity of cryptocurrency adoption and its impact on governments' abilities to collect taxes, enforce laws, do economic development, manage their economies, all those sorts of things. And that project's ongoing if you're interested in that, and that's going to result in a set of cryptocurrency standard recommendations. But I don't have time to cover that a lot. If you're interested in that, please see me and we'll get you connected. Let's talk about the blockchain maturity model. Where's Jordan, are you my slide turner?
You have the pointer.
Oh, I have the pointer. Cool. All right. So it's important to understand that people we brought together for this were literally experts from all over the world in every aspect of the blockchain cryptocurrency space, at the national, international levels, across domains. And so that's a group. This is put together by our blockchain standards group. And so here's the problem, right? Enterprises and governments are going to acquire blockchain solutions. The problem is that they don't have the knowledge or the framework, right, to be able to assess a good one from a bad one. So consequently, they're always going to default to IBM or Deloitte. And by the way, there's a QR code at the end of this presentation. If you'd like to hit it, you can download the whole presentation. So, because nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM as a solution. So the purpose really is a couple of things. One is we want to create a roadmap, and I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see the slides, so I'm totally winging this. I'm looking at the title of the slide, and I'm like, okay, I think I know what's on there. So my words deviate for that. Yeah, I kind of know it. So we want to create a roadmap, right, for people who are building solutions to understand how they can mature their solution. And we want to create assessment frameworks so that folks in government enterprises can say, you know what, I selected these guys, and I did because they had an international, global government association validate that they could be trusted. And that's why we put it together. And so the structure and the content is, it's broken down along 5 levels, right? And it goes all the way from, hey, is this something that we should consider seriously, right? Is this something that we could put research and development money behind? Is it something we could deploy as a proof of concept? Could we roll it out into a production environment, right? Or could we roll it out into either a global environment or at least have confidence that it can adapt, right, to continue going on? And we looked at a blockchain in terms of 11 different perspectives, right? And these are what we call the core requirements, right? These are things every blockchain solution should be able to deal with or handle. And by the way, if you want to get a copy of the model, it's open source. Go to gbaglobal.org under resources, click on blockchain maturity model. You'll see all this stuff, including you can download the model, right? And in addition to that, we looked at sort of supplemental requirements. So as I mentioned yesterday, GBA has 50 working groups. And so while there are some things that are central to all use cases, but you got some that are unique. So let's take identity management as an example. If you're building an AML KYC, if you're doing like a financial services solution, you got to do AML KYC. You got to know exactly who this person is. You got to be able to trace money. I mean, you got to do identity management in a significant way. But if you're doing an election system, you have to have permanent separability between the voter and the vote. So in no way can you know who voted for John Smith, right? If you're doing, let's say in healthcare, say medical trials, clinical trials, you have to know where the patient data came from, but you can't know who the patient is. So you need to have some traceability. So in every industry, right? If you're talking about any subject, there are these unique requirements. So our working groups, our banking working groups, are talking about, okay, well, what should be the solutions if you're doing some sort of derivatives, or if you're doing different types of financing, right? So one of the things that we're going to do in GBA this year is we're harmonizing GBA, right? Our training, our working groups, our meetings around the BMM, because it creates a common context for everything that we do. And at the core, GBA is about helping our members essentially sell their products and services. This is something that helps our members sell their products and services, and we can even connect this with the work that we're doing with our investor community. So investors can use a BMM to assess potential startups on whether or not they're going to put money into. So it gives everybody the same sheet of music to work off of. Yeah, and the nice thing is we've done a lot of work coordinating with different organizations like ACT-IAC, ISO. Dino, who is we had a little get-together last night. You'll see a picture of him later. Dino right now is the only GBA lead blockchain maturity model assessor in the world. He's upstairs doing something with a media roundtable. But he's working with the United Nations. And so we're working with a lot of different international organizations. And quite frankly, we're out in front. There's nobody anywhere close to where we are. I think he mentioned this last night. ISO, they're just trying to get a vocabulary together. Right? We're like, well, we're just going. So anyway, ACT-IAC is an organization. They basically deal with and you'll hear a little bit about them later. These guys basically are across the government footprint, at least here in the United States. I think they're a national organization. And so they're very involved with electronic engineering, technology. It's a technology organization across the federal footprint. They're putting together something called the ACT-IAC playbook. So if somebody wants to implement a blockchain solution, actually, Don, are you involved with the playbook at all? Yeah. So when I'm done, well, actually, if you wouldn't mind going to the microphone, you want to just tell them a little bit about the IAC playbook? All right. When I'm done, I'll have Don say a few words about it. But that's about an organizational preparation, right? And so part of that is they have to assess a blockchain solution. Well, the BMM fits into the ACT-IAC playbook perfectly. So we're going to different organizations to figure out, okay, well, what are you doing? How can we support or supplement you in those areas? We built an assessment framework, right? And that assessment framework essentially basically starts off with, let me just start by saying this. It's not a test. It's not like a pass-fail. Here's what it is. Have any of you guys ever done karate or have kids in karate? Show of hands. Okay. So, I don't know, the karate master, the folks that are teaching, they're teaching them, right? And then at a certain point, they sit on a table on the other side and they're grading them, right? And so their goal is to help that student mature, right, and meet certain benchmarks, right? But it's not like, I don't care whether you pass or fail. So this whole methodology is really, it starts out with, okay, we're going to send you the requirements. You tell us where you think you are, right? And then we're going to take a look at that. And then we're going to sit down, we're going to have a conference, and we're going to teach and coach you and help mentor you to get up to that level that you need to get to. Hey, I'm going to be going after investors, and I want to get this. Or I'm trying to make a sale to government, I need to get to level 3, right? And it's somewhat of a coaching, mentoring process, right? We do these conferences until they get to that point, and then at that point, we can award the level. It's done by an assessment team. And by the way, these requirements right now we're still sort of finalizing, but in order to be a lead assessor, you've got to have some experience, right? It's kind of hard right now. There's not a lot of folks with experience. Dino has built the first blockchain for the United Nations pension benefit program. Anyway, so he's got experience building a blockchain, and it was very involved in building these standards. But we want to work with people that want to become lead assessors. And then there's a lead assessor and assessment teams. The reason why this is done by an assessment team as opposed to a person is there is a lot for us to figure out. And if somebody tries to go in there with a school textbook solution, right, it's not going to work because building blockchains is a lot more nuanced. So you really want somebody that's got like a tokenomic perspective, an engineering perspective, a business perspective. And the idea is, this may be a very foreign concept to many of you, that they will award the level based on consensus, right? It's a very collaborative process. And then some of the folks that are leading this, Mayapan leads our standards organization. He's actually intimately involved in ISO. In fact, I'll tell you a little story. I helped the first company in the United States become an ISO 9000 registrar. So back in the day, it was BS 5720, I think. And my boss said, there's this thing, they're calling it ISO 9000. There's nobody in the United States that does registrations. We want to do that. Gerard, would you lead that? I didn't lead it, but I was on the team. I was instrumental in that happening. I wasn't the actual leader of the team. Dino works at the United Nations. He's a CIO. He's one of the CIOs. And then we've got Frederick there. You can see his background. He works with ACT-IAC. He's in training, so he will probably be our second lead assessor. He's going through the process right now. So I told everybody that we were going to release this on April 30th. April 30th of this year, and it looked, at the beginning of April, it looked like it was a pretty long stretch. We actually released it, and for those of you who know me, this is not a good thing. I tend to get things done probably at the last minute, but at 11:55 p.m. on April 30th, we released the model. Yeah, there was a lot of work that you can imagine almost 2 years of okay, this is the way it should be. Yeah, but that's not going to work. Well, what about this way? Well, that's sort of, it was really, it was an entire year of getting closer and closer. I also spent some time in the military. So for those of you in the military, it was like triangulating a target, bracketing a target with artillery, just finally getting closer. So this year, is Dino down here yet? No. All right. We've piloted several assessments already. We did pilot, well, we'll talk about that a little later. We're very successful. We just launched the standard. We're going to do some training. Anybody who's in, tomorrow we're going to do training on the BMM. If anybody's interested in that, just send an email to support@gbaglobal.org, and we'll get you on the list. It'll be upstairs in the Virginia room. And then so this year we're going to be doing some assessments, right? If anybody's interested in having assessments done, send an email to the same place. And what we'll do is we'll set up a meeting, we'll walk you through the requirements, and we'll walk through the process. We're still kind of figuring out the funding model. So if you ask me, well, how much does it cost? Not really sure, right? Not really sure how much time these things are going to take, but we're going to work together to keep the cost affordable. And then we'll put out we're going to receive data back from all of those assessments, and at the beginning of next year, we will put out an updated version of the model, plus a toolbox to help people do these assessments. Eventually, we'd like this assessment, and this is what the AI working group is going to be working on, to be a DAO. So the AI working group is working on a process to make blockchain maturity model assessments a decentralized autonomous function. All right? And with that, how am I doing on time? Doing fine. Okay. I'll just open, if you guys want a copy of the slides, you can take that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And Brian can ask the question, okay, are you done?
No. So I guess some of the questions that people would want to know is who were people in the working group that actually helped create this model? What's their backgrounds?
So Dino was involved all the way through. Paul Dowding, do you know Paul Dowding?
I do. Yeah. I interviewed him too.
Oh yeah, oh, awesome. Paul Dowding has a fantastic technology that does blockchain without consensus. And so he came at this thing from a very, very different perspective. So every time we thought, okay, well, how does it work with Bitcoin, right? Okay, how does it work with Ethereum? What about Hyperledger, right? And we would think we'd have it figured out, and then Paul Dowding would say, well, wait a minute, we don't even do consensus. And we're like, shh, now what, right? So we had some folks from Cardano participate, Everscale, several different blockchain representatives were there, and then folks from government, and different standards organization, ISO. It was a pretty comprehensive group.
Great. And in terms of creating the document, what was the original vision, and how did that morph into the final version?
We had two primary things that we had to wrestle with. Is this an organizational standard or is it a product standard, right? And even once we defined it, we kept sort of falling back and forth. It ended up being a product standard, right? But the product has to exist within an organizational context. So it's a little bit of a hybrid. And then the other thing was, is it a standard or is it a model? Because a standard has very sort of binary pass-fail things. And a model is more like, well, think about this could be helpful. And we had folks in the group that came from a standards perspective, right? Looking at this as a product specification versus a model. So those were the things that we sort of wrestled with. And with that, let me turn it over to, if it's okay.
Yeah. Please, ask a question.
Don, you want to come up here?
No, I'm fine from here. So there are over 10,000 state and local government entities in the U.S., thousands more in other jurisdictions worldwide. How is this new capability going to help those people as they try to understand implementing new technology, validating vendors, qualifying people that can do this type of work? What do you see there?
Well, the first thing to understand is it is a resource, right? most of them, like I said on the first slide, have no clue how to evaluate. So we're talking to Bill Rockwood. He's upstairs right now with the Congressional Blockchain Caucus. We're looking at introducing legislation. We're going to go into the Senate first to say, just to put something into the law that says the BMM is a resource that can be helpful. I told them we can't make it a requirement. It's too early. But we've talked to people in Rhode Island, in Florida, in Utah, and a couple different places, right? And in Miami-Dade County, Commissioner Beaudry said that he wants to use this as a criteria for people entering into the Miami-Dade County incubator. So the most important, and then we've briefed at the GSA all of the category leads, acquisitions category leads, about this, and they were thrilled because they don't really know how to do this, and if we can give them something that they can kind of cut and paste right into the RFPs, then for them, it's because if they don't know, right, they're gonna just kind of borrow something. So if we can demonstrate it's got legitimacy, right, and it's a resource, we don't want to make it a requirement, but we certainly want to make it a resource and let all those people know, hey, you can use it if you want to.
So back to Jim's talk where he had his 3 Ps, this really bridges the people aspect of blockchain and allows them to kind of understand some of the technical underpinning.
So when the 3 Ps are what? People, process, and?
People, profits, and planet.
Oh, people,
Planet.
profits, and the planet. So I think it does at least 2, maybe 3. From a profit perspective, right? If I can meet a standard and demonstrate that you can trust it, I think it helps with profits, right? If you're an investor and you have to make a decision between, am I going to do this one that potentially might be hypeware and this one that's legitimate, it might give me a better return on investment on what my investments are.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that you brought up is how will all these different government organizations utilize it? Really doesn't have to be applied by every little one. I mean, you don't need to have Laramie, Wyoming approve a blockchain model, but Wyoming as a state might come up with a solution and then provide guidance for all the groups within the state, and that probably would be a state-by-state application.
Yeah.
Funny you mentioned Wyoming, the best place to form a DAO in the U.S.
Yeah.
So
true.
they're pretty advanced for their relative population. I mean,
Yeah.
I have some experience. I worked in the D.C. state or local government, and there are going to be different models. The larger governments are going to take on projects where they're dealing with the component parts. The smaller governments are going to have packaged solutions that people have put together that encourage them to take advantage of the parts without having to understand all the technical details. So
Yeah.
I think
Correct.
they're going to be, relative repetitive needs, things like licensing, titles, the record-keeping asports of government. They're going to be innovative leads, the things that, the VA and the
Of course,
various
yeah.
health groups are going to do.
Don, let me, because I know there are other people waiting to ask questions, and I just want to say 2 things. If you guys are interested in a GBA chapter, talk to Don. Don runs our GBA chapters globally, right? And then,
I'm the director of the membership operations, so I can help you, find a local chapter, found a local chapter, get connected. And then we connect back into the communities of interest, such as the standards group, as members have different things they're interested in.
Perfect. We have 3 more questions, so let's, and it just gives us just enough time before we break for lunch. So,
I'll go real quick. So hi, I'm Jen Loudon. I'm one of the Innovation Showcase competitors from yesterday afternoon. And just kind of speaking of what you were just alluding to, having it be not a requirement but a resource, is there or has there been any talk about maybe offering startups the ability to apply for like a seal of approval or a certification, yes, that this startup meets these qualifications that we can display to potential investors or to potential customers, that yes, we have been kind of unofficially vetted by an association like this?
well, there's no unofficial vetting, right? What I would encourage you to do, download the model, then do a self-assessment of your solution against it. Now, the model requirements are are pretty tight. They say, hey, listen, you got to have some stuff documentation. You document it. But the documentation that we put together is exactly what Ingrid's asking for when she's doing her investor stuff, right? Do you have a risk management plan? Have you considered about your markets, right? All of those, what's your design? How are you going to do consensus? So what it really requires, right, instead of, a couple guys in a garage banging out some code and creating stubware, right? It really requires you to document and answer some questions, right? So that if you show your documentation, they can read your documentation and say, okay, I understand your engineering. I understand your development process. I understand, what your tokenomic situation, how this thing is, there's an ecosystem. And I understand that there is a plan that if we put our money into this thing, this is going to grow. So I would say the very first step is to download the model. And the second step is send an email to support@gbaglobal.org and say we're interested in an assessment. Look, the assessment's going to be a process, right? We're not going to come out the next day. It's going to be a process. And we recognize startups don't have a lot of money, but we'll work with you guys because we want this thing to be accepted and adopted. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Gerard, Torben Anderson from Rewired. We're hoping to be part of the appraisal team at some point. My question was on the DAO, and you may still be formulating that, but I was just super curious what that might look like.
Well, so I would tell you this. We first have got to get the basic processes, understood, defined, right? A DAO is about smart contracts, and in order to have smart contracts, you have to have the processes defined. We're not at the place yet where we can define those, but we are at the place where we recognize that that's the goal. So as we develop the process, we're asking ourselves, is this a process that we could build into a smart contract, right? And I think the answer in almost all those cases are yes. It's going to, we got a number of folks in the DAO community here. It's going to be the kinds of things where you submit some kind of input to a group. That group is going to be incentivized to vote because the payment that you pay for the assessment will probably get converted into some token that will then be awarded to the people who make meaningful contributions. And so there's a lot of stuff to figure out there. But we got to get the basic assessment process, the human one, done first.
Thanks, Gerard.
Thanks.
Anyway, thank you, Gerard.
Thank you. You bring